So let's move into climate change. And this will probably, I think we're going to go pretty fast through this. So just in case you guys don't know, climate change is happening. I'm not going to go into the chemistry and the carbon cycle and stuff of that uh, because that's not my field of expertise. But I did read through the IPCC 2014 report. And these different bars are showing different greenhouse gas emission concentrations in the atmosphere. And RCP 2.6 is usually like the lowest, and I'll explain a little bit more about that in the next slide. And RCP 8.5 is the highest. So basically what we're going to see over here is that we're probably going to be going between 4 degrees and 1 degree Celsius of global average surface temperature increase. And we're also going to see sea levels rise. So 0.4 meters, it's like one, well, I can't multiply that. But 3 feet are in 1 meter. So 0.4 meters is at least a foot. So either way, temperatures and sea levels will rise, and they are rising currently. Again, just to explain, RCP 2.6 is if greenhouse gas concentrations in the atmosphere peaks last year. That's probably, it didn't happen. No, probably about it. It didn't happen. RCP 8.5, it means that greenhouse gas emissions concentrations will not peak at all in the 21st century. And that depends on a lot of different factors, technology, social movements, business, et cetera, et cetera. I think, and they're going to come out with a new form or a new report in a year, which is going to look more at the social and cultural impacts on these concentrations. But I think if I remember what the report said, we're looking at, the report said that we're looking at somewhere between 6.0 and 8.5 currently. And 6.0 means that greenhouse gas concentrations will peak in like 2080. But I also read elsewhere while I was doing this lecture that RCP 4.5 seems to be where we're currently at. So that's if greenhouse gas concentrations peak in 2050 and start declining. So when I'm saying peak, I mean they get to the highest point and then they start declining. I mean, the report often talks about the comparison between 2.6 and 8.5. So that's all I have at this moment. But we're looking at not this bad, not over here, not as bad as on the right, but we're definitely not looking at what's on the left. So what you're going to see is this, this map of the globe, and we have temperature increases by Celsius degrees, changes in average surface temperature. So how much hotter is it going to be in certain areas? And so we're not going to look at absolute because RCP 8.5 isn't necessarily the pathway we're on. But we are going to look at trends and where the most heat is being increased. And that's in the Arctic in the north. We do see a lot more heat here in the northern latitudes, but we see heat increases basically everywhere. And the little dot marks means that the model is sure that this is basically what the temperature increase is going to be. If you see like a little hash mark, that means that the model is unsure. Okay. Now, when we're talking about heat, we're not talking, heat is important. And if you remember the lecture, who's its lecture? Dr. Shell's lecture on urban environmental racism and urban heat islands, and the idea that, cities, especially poorer sections of the cities that don't have as much green or trees, um, they tend to be a lot hotter than other sections of cities or even rural areas. So we have, increases in temperature is obviously going to increase the temperature, especially in cities. But what we really want to focus on is this thing called the wet bulb temperature. And that's basically the temperature plus the humidity. And humans are only, like, we are only physiologically capable of surviving up until 35 degrees wet bulb temperature. After that, we have so much heat stress because we're not able to cool ourselves off if it's not either through sweat or pouring water on yourself. The water doesn't evaporate, so it doesn't cool off. And so we're going to see increases in days in the year where the wet bulb temperature is going to be at dangerous levels, at deadly levels. Deadly, not dangerous, deadly. So this other paper, Koffel et al. 2017, looked at, try to project how many days in the year would we get into those dangerous, deadly levels of wet bulb temperatures. So we have at least around five. If we're looking at the RCP 4.5 pathway that says that we peak in greenhouse emissions in 2050. So we have dangerous, deadly numbers of days in the Southeast. And it looks like maybe it looks like maybe near what is that, Ohio or Illinois? And we have for 8.5, we have a lot larger spread of deadly, dangerous days, even in Pennsylvania. So it's going to be so hot that people are going to be in danger of dying from heat stress. We also see a lot of increases around this tropical belt. And so you guys hopefully have already read that that part that I put on in writing. But the 2003 European heat wave that killed 70,000 people, it only reached 28 degrees Celsius in wet bulb temperature. So we're looking at 32 degrees Celsius for both of these greenhouse gas concentration pathways. And we're seeing that, there are definitely going to be days. And so this is basically these figures are an underestimate of days where we'll get to the point where it's so hot and so humid that people will be dying because of heat stress. If you're looking at changes in precipitation, and I'm showing you guys all these maps just so you guys can sort of see, because you're looking at temperature changes, you're looking at changes in precipitation, you're looking at changes in sea level rise, which I'll get to in the next slide. And this is all going to change ecosystems, right? So we're looking at changes in precipitation, a lot more rain in the north. Again, usually it seems to be following, what do you call it? The heat map right here. So in places where it's getting hotter, we seem to be getting a little bit more rain. And it also looks we're getting less rain, especially in South Africa. So South Africa is already having trouble with water. We're definitely going to see less rain in the Southwest, which is expected. But all this is going to change things like agriculture. It's going to change ecosystems. It's going to change how much water people have to drink. And again, so we have these little dots, which means that they're sure that this is going to happen, and these little hashtag marks, which means that they're not quite sure. And then, of course, you have sea level rise, which we're seeing up to 0.8 meters. So that's at least 2 feet in sea level rise. It's too early for me to be doing math like that. all along this coast, all along our coasts, um, all along these coasts, and that's definitely going to change ecosystems and change where people are able to live. Yeah, so mentioning that it's changing ecosystems. And because these are changes in ecosystems, changes in how hot things are, how dry things are, plants are going to change, and then the animals that live there are going to either have to migrate or they're going to have to figure out how to live in these changed ecosystems. We have extinction risks increasing as temperature does. Um, so we're seeing less extinction risk in Europe and North America. Um, I'm not quite sure why that is. It could be because it's in the northern latitudes, but that doesn't make sense because we have Siberia, and how many studies do they have? I think personally, I think this might have to do with how connected protected areas are and whether there are pathways for animals to move and how rapidly and badly things are going to change. But we're seeing extinction risk ranging from 10% to up to 40% of species are going to be at risk for extinction because of changes, just because of temperature increases. And what time is it? We have changes in, so as climate change risk increases, we're going to have influences on tourism. So we can see that there's going to be less risks of tourism being affected by climate change, mostly in the north and in Europe. But there's going to be a lot higher risks in Africa and South America and then Southeast Asia and South Asia. And actually, I do have a question for you guys. It's 10:05. Okay. So it would change the desirability of some places. That makes sense. Yep. Uh, industry will find a way to sort of deal with climate change because they'll make figure out a way to make the change be attractive. Um, Someone thinks more people will actually want to visit things before they are messed up. Makes sense. I kind of do. uh, you got less tourism, large declines in local income. So yeah, so that's what I really want you guys to focus on. So we have this idea of, let me see. So we have this idea of the global South and particularly Africa and these national parks and how, the economies and conservation is so funded by tourism and people from out of the country coming in and paying and supposedly making tourism pay. So with increases in climate change, the variability of weather, the intensity of weather, and even the changing ecosystems, we're going to see tourism change. And so even if tourism did pay for conservation, which I don't believe it does at the moment, it's not going to pay in the future, or it's going to change how it pays in the future, how much it pays, etc. So this is another reason why ecotourism should not be, the number one thing that we focus on. Okay, so we got climate change, increasing risks of changes in food production. So for fishing, we're going to see a lot less maximum potential catch, especially around the coast, it looks like, and especially in the tropics, which makes sense. If the water is also, the sea is going to get hotter, acidification is going to increase. So we're going to see changes in where fish are, which is going to influence people, because if they're not able to get food the way they normally would, they're probably going to have to move. We also see changes in yield change for crops. So I think this graph is looking at wheat, and it's looking at the grain crops, so wheat, rice, etc. And what we see as we get further into the decade, we're going to see a lot more decreases in yield compared to changes or increases in yield. So we're going to have a lot more less food being grown unless we figure out a way to deal with it, which, I mean, we might be able to do it. I'm pretty sure we will using technology, but it's going to be iffy there. But we're not going to run out. I don't know if you guys have been reading the news, but I saw that there was like a headline or something, or a study or something that was misstated. And it said that we're going to run out of food in like 2060. That's not going to happen. So we're looking at regional risks now. So for North America, we have a lot of heat-related human mortality, increased damages from wildfires, which makes sense, increases of coastal and urban floods. We have water stress in Africa, reduced crop productivity and food security, and increases in vector and waterborne diseases. Again, reduced water availability in Central and South America, food production and quality. For small islands, we got losses of livelihoods and settlements because the sea levels are going to rise, and so we're going to have less land. For Europe, more floods, increases in water restrictions, damages from extreme heat events. So those heat waves, those wet bulb temperatures will get us. Same with in Asia, we got heat-related human mortality, increased drought, and water shortages. What time is it? I forgot I was muted. Okay. Let's start up here. Okay, so what she was talking about with climate migration, that is not only going to be people in tropical countries. It's not going to only be in the global south. It will happen in the global north. So this is a study that was looking at how projected sea level rise will influence migration in America. And what we see is, obviously, if you get sea level rise and it's taking out or making, not necessarily completely flooding, but making living in these coastal areas uninhabitable, untenable, you're going to get people moving out of those areas and moving further inland into America. And so they figured that up to 13 million people could possibly be influenced by sea level rise within the century. And I think one of the higher estimates was like 24 million people would be migrating into other counties that are further from the coast. So we're going to need places and jobs and things for these people to do, right? This is just another example. It's an article, Climate Change Will Force a New American Migration. It's not only taking into account sea level rise, it's taking into account wildfires. I know this personally because I am from California, as I've mentioned multiple times during this course. I had a choice to move back to California with a postdoc I got, and I decided to stay in Pennsylvania for another year, even though I don't really like it. And it's not only just because the cost of living is cheaper and I'd be able to save more money, but it's also because I don't want to have to deal with the smoke and the wildfires that I know are going to start happening probably this summer, probably around June or July. And I just don't want to deal with it. I'm going to share another video, and this is someone from a more American viewpoint. Okay. So Just some takeaways, just to sort of hammer home the points. Hopefully, that those videos gave you guys. Climate change is happening, even in the United States, and deadly days for heat, wet bulb temperatures, things that are going to kill people, mostly in cities, in places where there isn't the infrastructure, the green infrastructure to keep places cool, or people who are too poor to have air conditioning, or get access to air conditioning, the homeless. Those days that kill those people are going to happen, and they are going to increase. Even in the United States, ecosystems are going to change, species will go extinct, even in the United States, and many people will need to migrate, even in the United States. Climate change seems to be, we seem to see climate change as a sort of future problem, even if it's just near future, and a problem for other people, but it is eventually going to be all of our problems. And I want you guys to come out of this class knowing that.